The hook I'm using for this fly is a Firehole Sticks 551, 1x long, 2x heavy, in size 8. For thread, I'm using Veevus 16-aught in olive. I use a 1/2-inch sequin pin paired with a 4.2mm tungsten bead to offset the weight and balance the fly. I find that applying Zap-A-Gap to these initial thread wraps, then covering it with additional wraps, really locks the pin in well. For the tail, I prefer the real webby lower fibers on the blood quill. The lower fibers from a saddle hackle or a piece of schlappen are even better, but I've used up all of mine. I measure to form a tail a little more than a hook shank in length, and then I use my thumbnail to strip the fuzzies from the quills. This helps minimize tie-in bulk. On this fly, I'm going for a two-tone tail effect, so I tie in the olive marabou first, so that it sits on top of the fly once it's oriented correctly in the water. I double over a piece of Flashabou accent or crystal flash to add some sparkle to the tail. Next comes the white marabou for the bottom portion of the tail, tied in the same way as the olive marabou. By tying the tail down the hook bend a ways, I'm ensuring that the tail doesn't get fouled around the bend of the hook while fishing. Now I am making two dubbing loops. Since I'm using such thin thread, I'm doubling it over to prevent it from breaking when I twist up the dubbing. I only have one dubbing whirl, so I'm using my whip finish tool to hold my second loop out of the way. First, I lay down a thin layer of olive ice dub. Then, I lay down a bit of brown olive bruiser blend. These Loon brand D-loop tweezers make transferring the dubbing into the dubbing loop a cinch. Use the dubbing whirl to spin a tight dubbing noodle. Use a dubbing brush to tease out the fibers and remove any clumps. Palmer the dubbing noodle forward, preening back the fibers as you go. Use touching wraps and tie off your dubbing noodle behind the bead. Brush out the fibers. And trim the bottom portion. I don't know what happened to the label, but this is minnow belly white ice dub. Grab an ample clump, and insert it into the second dubbing loop. Create a short dubbing noodle and tease out the fibers. Pull the second dubbing loop forward and tie it off right behind the bead. Break off any extra long fibers. End with a 4 or 5 turn whip finish and cut your thread. A pair of pliers helps make a flat surface to set the eyes. A dab of Zap-A-Gap will ensure the eyes stay in place. I prefer these small 3mm holographic eyes. After both eyes are in place, I use Solarez bone dry resin to create a bit of a head, but more importantly, the resin will keep the body fibers propped up, creating a slim, baitfish-like profile to the fly. Rivers or lakes, under a bobber or on the strip, this fly catches fish, plain and simple.